Hello, Jody Hardesty with Empowered Heart Connections. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking about codependency today. And codependency can have varying levels of significance depending on the person and the situation. Codependency often is triggered by childhood insecurities and self-esteem issues. It can also be modeled to kids, and so they develop that sort of comfortableness with a codependent relationship, and therefore they replicate that in relationships growing up. And codependency can be involved in relationships and dating relationships, but can also be involved in friendships and family relationships. So it can impact all kinds of different dynamics. And again, can be varying levels of severity and depending on the situation. So again, one of the major precursors for having some codependency difficulties is self-esteem. So a lot of times people who feel a strong need to be dependent on others or need to have a constant connection with others have some pretty significant self-esteem issues that make them feel like they're invalid without having someone else there to make them feel important, make them feel heard, make them feel connected. And there are many different ways this can kind of display itself. One way is a lack of boundaries. So a lot of times when these people who struggle with self-esteem are feeling codependent, they are having a strong need to have other people to make them feel validated, they struggle with setting boundaries. So this may look like they are maybe texting several times a day, they don't really know when to quit. Maybe they're calling continuously, they want to spend all the time together, they want to really connect no matter what's going on. So the boundaries is a real big issue whenever people are struggling with codependency. And many people can become codependent when they are in a dysfunctional relationship. So sometimes it is not something that has originated in childhood, but that whenever someone has been in a dysfunctional relationship with someone who's continually invalidating them, they tend to crave that connection with the other person, which creates kind of a push-pull dynamic, which makes it even more challenging to not feel codependent. Again, many people struggle with codependency and some level of codependency in their relationships in their lives. And the good news is it can be changed. It can, with some self-awareness and some personal development, codependency can decrease and relationships can improve. But first, obviously, it has to do with recognizing that it's even happening. And a lot of times people who are codependent don't really want to acknowledge that's the problem because it feels so good for them to continue to have interactions with other people instead of focusing on their own feelings, their own needs, their own hurts, and dealing with some of the overwhelm that might have led them to become codependent in the first place. So often these people who struggle with codependency have a need for control, a sense of safety, which is true with many difficulties that people have, is often we have a belief that this is going to give us some sense of control or going to make us safer. So for example, whenever you have a lot of worry, often we are anticipating that our worry is going to come up with some solution to prevent us from being in danger, right? A sense of controlling outcomes, controlling our lives in a way that is usually not productive. Usually worrying just makes it more challenging until the event actually happens. But it is a way that we tell ourselves that we're going to have control over a situation. And it's the same with people who are codependent, is they're trying to have some sense of control. They feel powerless, they feel alone, they feel not worthy, and so they are constantly trying to grasp for a sense of safety and control by having interactions with others. They also often struggle with making decisions on their own and are continually looking for validation and someone else outside of themselves to help them feel like it's okay to make a choice. It's okay to make decisions and move forward in their lives, because they are so externally focused. It's really challenging for them to go, okay, what are my internal resources? What skills do I have that make me capable of making decisions and being able to move forward in my life without having a group of people or someone in particular that you are focused on to offer you reinforcement and support for that topic. Sometimes the codependent person or the person who experiences codependency can lie. This is not always, but it is a characteristic at times. And again, it's that desperate need for approval. So maybe they're lying about their level of skill, or maybe they're lying about some past trauma that they've had, or maybe they're lying about why they need to interact with you so that they can, again, recreate that connection. So often, ironically, even though they are doing behaviors that will unintentionally promote rejection, people who suffer from codependency are often very, very afraid of getting rejected. They already have a really low self-esteem, so they're very fearful of people not liking them or people's negative reactions, and unintentionally create negative reactions by needing so much interaction, so much contact with their partners or friends, that they tend to push people away. And sometimes this can even be unintentional love bombing. So if you've heard of that term, whenever somebody is saying so many nice things to you all at once, and they're just telling you how wonderful you are, and it feels a little overwhelming, that sometimes a person who's codependent can participate in that they are trying so desperately to have someone like them and connect them, that they are maybe kind of being excessively complimentary and having a hard time kind of reining it in a little bit with what's appropriate. So finding that level of appropriateness for connection can be really challenging for someone who tends to be codependent. Now, I have seen many situations where people are not naturally codependent, and because of an unhealthy relationship, they have developed, as I mentioned before, some codependency tendencies. And this can happen because of insecurities in relationships. So if you start out and you're not a codependent person, but your partner starts doing things like pulling away or changing the rules or being inconsistent or maybe criticizing you or making things challenging as far as meeting expectations, like they keep changing the bar, right? Like, okay, you need to go here and I'll be happy, or here, or here, or here. That can create a sense of insecurity, which then in turn can make someone kind of develop some codependency characteristics, which makes a lot of sense in relationships. Is whenever somebody is constantly trying to know, where am I in this relationship? How safe am I? Do you love me? Do you want me? Do you need me? Do you want to be in a relationship with me? Then that obviously can create some insecurities, which can then lead to someone continually trying to connect with their partner. Like, where did you go? This can also happen even in relatively functional relationships where one partner isn't necessarily able to emote, or they're the perfect one, the caretaker. They're not able to really share their own vulnerabilities, so they become kind of this idealized partner, which leaves the other partner being desperate for some real depth of connection. So that can also create that sense of codependency. Is like, well, you're the perfect one, that must mean I'm broken. So how do we deal with that dynamic, right? And that becomes relatively codependent, is how do I continue to try to connect with this person who's unable to connect with me? And that creates some of that unintentional behaviors of maybe pushing someone away because you're so clingy and so needy for that approval, because they're withholding that. Right? So this isn't necessarily a good guy, bad guy situation, but particularly in relationship dynamics, I have found that there are rarely good guys or bad guys, but there are just dynamics that really need checking into and evaluating to see if they're possible to shift, because many relationships are they have their challenges. Every relationship has their challenge, and most relationships can improve. So if you are in a relationship and you're experiencing some codependency, either from your partner or from yourself, know that it's possible to shift these behaviors and to recognize what the splinter, so to speak, is in the relationship that's needing addressed. All of these behaviors people usually do because they're trying to solve a problem. And usually, most of us haven't been taught perfect coping mechanisms and the ability to communicate our needs in an effective and productive way. Most of us have to learn this all the hard way. So these are instinctual tools that people use to try to fix the dysfunctions in their relationships or the inadequacies in their own feelings of themselves. So these are all just functions of being human, which we all are guilty of in one way or another, and they can be changed. But again, this codependency, it really takes some self-awareness to recognize, okay, what is it that I'm feeling insecure about? How can I express that? How can I share that with either a friend or a family member that I'm kind of maybe pushing away with my codependency? And how do I recognize when it's happening? And how do I work on my own self-esteem so that I don't have that need to overly connect with my partner? The other thing is sometimes partners just aren't a match, right? So or even friendships. So if you want to have, get together days, 3 days a week with somebody you're dating and they only want 1 day a week, you may not be a match, and that's okay. That's information for you to have, is that it may not be codependency. It may just be that you guys aren't necessarily a match as far as wanting equal time together. And those are some things to explore, especially if you are dating and are looking to see if someone is a compatible match for you or not. So these are all tools, it's all information of awareness and how to really be in tune with yourself, in tune with what your feelings about self-worth are, and maybe doing some exploration if you are struggling with some codependency about what that's about and what you would need in order to feel safer in these relationships. So even checking in with some friends, maybe that you have some close friends that you might have a tendency to be codependent with, is really connecting with them and sharing with them your struggle and what you're going through and what you're trying to work on. And maybe asking them to share with you what their hopes are, what their expectations are, what feels comfortable for them as far as a relationship goes, and what would feel better. Like, am I texting too much? Or would it feel better if I texted less? Or do you want to get together less frequently? Does this feel like it's too much? So especially with people who are safe in your life, who are friends, who you can trust, these can be really helpful conversations to have with them, especially if you are in that boat of dating and you're trying to figure out maybe what could be pushing people away, and if it could be codependency, if it could be desire to really connect too quickly, to be too intimate too quickly with your partners, could be a reason why things may be not going so well in relationships. So really helpful information to explore. Again, we can always improve, but it takes some self-awareness, and it takes some being willing to dig into those uncomfortable places that we might be avoiding. And again, as I've talked about before, sometimes meditation can be really helpful for this, is checking in with what it feels like to just be alone by yourself. And that can be really hard for people who have a tendency to be codependent, because being alone is kind of scary. So why is being alone scary? Really taking the time to sit with those uncomfortable emotions, let them be there, give them a voice, sit with them like you would a friend, and just allow yourself to be uncomfortable in those moments of loneliness so that you can get through them, because it takes getting through that loneliness, that uncomfortable feeling, in order to get to the other side. Well, we have to go through the emotions to get to the other side. All right, they're there for a reason. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful, and stay tuned for my other short videos this week. Thanks for watching.